y'all, welcome back to my channel today, and this is going to be a little bit of a different video, something that I really need your help on. As the thumbnail and the title shows, probably going to be a little bit of an emotional video for me, so I'm just kind of throwing out the prefaces out of the gate here. And wow, life's been a whirlwind for 2020, man. I bet a lot of you guys can relate to that. I don't think anybody's gonna get out of 2020 unscathed, that's for dang sure. But my family really needs help right now, and I'm sharing this on my YouTube channel today. And we'll be sharing this video, you know, it's just being hosted here on my channel for my subscribers, letting you guys know what's going on in my life, why it's been hard for me to just do 2 videos a week. And on top of that, it's probably gonna get a little bit more inconsistent as the coming days and weeks ahead happen. As I just mentioned, I'm starting a GoFundMe for my family, mainly for my little brother. I will run the link across the screen below for you guys, and then it's also going to be in the description box. But my brother right now is fighting the 3rd battle of his life, for his life, really. My brother has been through a lot medically in the 27 years that he's been alive. We're now in the fight of our lives for him, and it's a difficult place to be. And so I just wanted to express where we're at and what's going on, and then kind of give you guys some history on my family that probably a lot of y'all don't know. Friends and family who see this will absolutely know, but you guys might even get a little more insight and detail than what you originally had about us. So I just want to start with that because I think it's really important to know kind of what a freaking warrior my brother is, and what he's already overcome, and why we're struggling right now so hard with the battle that he's fighting. So a little bit of history. I have a brother who's 7 years younger than I am. He's 27 currently, and when I was 7 years old, my family moved to Missouri in 1993. My dad had undergone open heart surgery prior to our move to St. Louis, and we lived in Texas at the time, and due to medical bills, my parents ended up having to file for bankruptcy. They only owed 7 years on their house, and it was a pretty traumatic time for them. My dad had a mechanical valve installed into his heart, so heart history is kind of ran itself pretty rapid through my family. My dad had heart issues as young as the age of 10, passing out on the football field, and had to undergo open heart surgery that year. It actually probably was prior to 93, but I know we moved in 1993 because my dad started a new job after he healed, and we couldn't afford where we were living at anymore. And so he had a friend at the time who offered him a position in St. Louis, Missouri, managing an axle place, a place to build car things, and that's what he did. And we moved to St. Louis and left our entire family behind so my parents could start over. If you've ever gone through a bankruptcy or any type of financial trouble, you know how hard that is to go through. Shortly after we moved to Missouri, my mom got some super exciting news that she was pregnant with another baby, and I was getting a sibling, so I was really excited. 7 years old. It's, you know, if any of you guys have had, you know, that moment happen when your mom tells you that, you know, hey, you're gonna be a sibling, you know, a big brother, big sister. It's a pretty exciting time. My mom went and got her ultrasound right around that 6-week mark, and that day was actually not as happy as what they had hoped for. She received really devastating news about the baby that she was carrying in her womb. Isaiah, we didn't know it was Isaiah at the time. Actually, she probably did know that it was a boy, but they don't have a name for him quite yet. But that day, my mom found out that the baby that she was carrying had something called hypoplastic left heart. And what this means is that the left side of my brother's heart was not forming. And in fact, it was incredibly deformed. And I can remember that the conversations were not good. They didn't expect my brother to make it to full term with the pregnancy. And actually, they told my mom that her best option was to have an abortion. And my family and I fully believe in the sanctity of life, and so abortion was never even a consideration on the table for my parents. So in their mind, you know, it was like, what other options do we have? That's not an option. And so they told my parents that if he made it to term,
They could do two things. They could do open heart surgery on him, and he would have to have multiple heart surgeries for as long as he lived, just because they couldn't repair it, so it would have been a whole lot of surgeries for him. Or they could do something that was really risky. There were no guarantees, but if it was successful, my brother would have a very long and happy and healthy life, and that was to receive a heart transplant. And so my parents, of course, being the Christ followers that they are, they prayed about everything, and God led them to do the risky decision and to give this baby a new heart. And they knew, because again, if it succeeded, it was going to be the greatest opportunity for him to have a long and happy, healthy life. And so that's what they did. At the time, I know they didn't have a name for him. I was actually just asking my mom about this. My dad had always liked the name Isaiah. He loved it. It was a cool biblical name. Isaiah was a super cool prophet in the Bible. If you've never read things about him, he's pretty stellar, pretty rad. But my mom was like, yeah, okay. As they talked about it long before this happened. I don't even know. It might have been even years before she got pregnant. But when she looked up what that name meant in Hebrew, it meant God is my helper. And she said, like, at that moment, it was just confirmation that that was what his name was supposed to be. So, of course, they named him in the womb. And I spent a lot of time talking to my mom's belly and getting to know Isaiah in the womb. I probably drove her crazy talking to him, but it was so cool being that young and being able to talk to my baby brother in the womb and having him like kick back and forth when I would talk to him. He knew who I was. There's just no doubt, because I spent so much time talking to him and doing all the things that kids do, when their mom's pregnant, and seeing his feet kick her belly and hands and whatever else was awesome. So, as a young girl going through that, I was very aware of what was going on with my brother. My parents always opted for honesty. Of course, you have to speak what's going on in a language that a 7-year-old can understand, but people that knew me growing up always said I was always an adult long before I ever turned of age. So I knew very clearly what was going on, and that there was a possibility that my brother, may not make it. Not only to not make it to term, but may not make it afterwards. But at a very young age, I had a very strong connection to God. And I certainly won't get into any details of my confidence and where that comes from, but I do have some amazing stories about that. But I was very confident that my brother was not only going to make it to term, but that he was going to get the heart that he needed. And so on June 16th, 1993, Isaiah was born into the world. My mom had to undergo a C-section, obviously, at Barnes in St. Louis. I remember being so anxious to meet him and waiting to be able to meet him, and I didn't know how that was going to roll. They had to basically transport my brother from Barnes immediately over to the PICU, the Pediatric Intensive Care Unit at Children's. And so they wheeled him out for me to see him. And he was screaming to high heaven. They rolled him out in this incubator, and he was just, his lungs worked amazing. He was a little blue. He definitely was blue, which babies typically don't look like that. But he was screaming. And they opened up the little windows one of the little windows so I could put my hand through there to touch him and talk to him. And immediately as I touched him and started talking to him, he just stopped crying and was as peaceful as he could be. My granny used to always remind me of that story. I remember it, but she would always tell it to me all the time. I'll never forget that. She would always tell me that before she passed away. And so they wheeled him over to Children's, and the hospital became our home for quite a while. Luckily, I was so blessed that there were lots of people involved in Isaiah's case, and there were a couple of medical students at the time who really took me under their wing, and they took me on tours of the hospital and, basically kept me entertained, because it was a very tough time emotionally for my parents, and obviously Isaiah was hooked up to every machine possible. But like I said, I was so confident that God was going to create a miracle for my brother. I don't know. When you're young, I guess, and you haven't seen the world as much as some of us do as adults, you really just don't have trouble believing certain things, I suppose. Maybe that's it. But yet, still my faith is that way. But I'll never forget the night that we got the call that we had been waiting for. And I remember when the phone rang, I looked at my mom and I said, "Mom, that's the hospital. Isaiah's got his heart." And, okay, Lauren. Not that she didn't believe me, but the phone rang a lot at the house, but I just knew that was the call we were waiting for. And sure enough, it was, and we were on our way for my brother to get his donor. On July 28th, 1993, just 6 short weeks later, but it felt like an eternity for us, Isaiah had his heart, and that heart, I'll maybe show it this way, but that heart fit in a cough syrup cup That's lipstick, by the way, if you can see that. It fit in the size of a cough syrup cup. So if you've ever seen that, his heart literally, all of its little attachments and everything fit inside that cup. So you can imagine how difficult it is to take a teeny tiny heart and put it into a teeny tiny baby and make sure that all goes well and functions properly, and that this baby doesn't die at the same time you remove the old one and put the new one in. It's pretty much an act of God if you ask me. But he made it. And to this day, 27 years later, my brother has the most perfect heart in transplant history. The baby that was a donor, whose mother was so gracious. He passed away of SIDS, and he had a twin brother. They were born on June 15th, and my brother was born on June 16th. So, we're still so grateful for her. We don't even know who she is, but we're so grateful for her because she gave life to my brother. And so if she ever gets a chance to see this, thank you. Thank you so much. Isaiah, he healed really quickly, and he got to come home. Lots of care, so much care for him. We lived in St. Charles at the time. Those of you from Missouri know right where that is, but my parents were broke, man. Coming out of a bankruptcy and medical bills taking over their situation again with Isaiah. We could no longer afford to live in the house that we were renting, and we had to move out to a really rural area in Warren County where I grew up and spent most of my life. But at the time, we were living in a 2-bedroom trailer with this brand new baby who, man, we had ice on the windows, and it was just, the living conditions weren't great, but it was all my parents could afford. And as I was saying, this brand new baby with a brand new heart needed all this care, and we just didn't have a lot. The bills were adding up, of course, and as I mentioned, my parents were just in mountains of medical debt. They applied for help. The one time that my parents actually applied for help to get assistance, they were denied because at the time, my dad made $10 too much a month. I know at some point after that, he lost his job, and my mom decided that she would start a business. My mom had an amazing background in medical transcription, and she knew that she could create a business doing that, and so that's exactly what she did. Over time, my parents, that business grew, and they were able to pay off, I believe it was over $500,000 in medical debt. I remember my dad used to keep this notebook of all Isaiah's bills, and as they would, pay things off, my dad would cross them off in a notebook. I mean, that's how he had to keep track of it because there was so much. Fast forward to Isaiah at 16 years old. Isaiah's heart is in perfect condition. Every test, every heart cath, everything that he had from the time that he got that heart at 6 weeks, all the way up until now, his heart has performed beautifully. It's still in amazing condition. But at 16 years old, my brother started to get sick again, and when they went in to figure out what was wrong, they determined that the rejection medication had caused his kidneys to start failing, and they were destroying the kidneys. So now here he is, 16 years old, prime of his life, and he now needs a kidney transplant. And so that was really difficult at the time. Lance and I were dating, and we were married. I can't do math very well. I'm 7 years older. I got married at 18. So yeah, Lance and I had to be married because my brother's 7 years younger than I am. But obviously they want to, look to the family first to see who can be a match for him. I ended up being a match, and there isn't anything in this world that I wouldn't do for my brother. So I was, pretty pumped to be able to be a match and give him a kidney. And right as we were getting ready to schedule that surgery, my brother was also on a waiting list at the time. A girl passed away. Her kidney ended up being better for him than mine. And so they decided to go that route. He got a kidney from her. And same thing to that family. We just really appreciate the gift of life that you gave my brother. It's not easy, I know, I'm sure, to lose a loved one. But when you donate your loved one's organs, the life that you're giving someone else is just so absolutely precious, and it's one of the most amazing gifts. And so I just want to say thank you. And because of that, I got to keep my kidney on reserve should he ever need it again in the future. Since I'm a match, it always, you never know when things are going to happen, and so that really was a good thing. Since then, Isaiah has battled a lot of skin cancer, He's had more skin cancers removed off of his body than any one person should in a lifetime. Unfortunately, the medications just cause a whole lot of other issues with his body. And, you know, the thing is even with that said, Isaiah's beat every odd that was against him in his life. Not going to make it to term. Probably not wise to pursue this pregnancy because he won't make it. Heart transplant's pretty risky. He made it. More than made it. Needs a kidney, gets a kidney, and God has just been so faithful to my family. And I'll be honest, as Christians, it's so hard in the midst of all of that to trust God's plan and to know it's not a matter of us trusting whether or not he can deliver. It's just sometimes trusting how, sometimes trusting will he. It's hard. So Isaiah spent a lot of his young life at home because he couldn't really go to public school. When he went to public school, it wasn't public school, it was more of a private school, but it was a very small private school, Christian school. Isaiah was getting sick all the time, and my parents just realized that it was best to homeschool him because his immune system is weak from the immunosuppressants and the rejection medication that he's on. So he was constantly sick all the time. But because of that, my brother found other outlets. My brother taught himself to play guitar. He writes music. He writes like literal melodies. He writes like music lyrics. My brother can play guitar like nobody's business. My brother has played at all kinds of different venues and led worship. My brother plays lead out of this world. Plays B.B. King, y'all. Like, my brother can freaking play. And he's all self-taught, every bit of it. He had hours a day to spend learning that kind of stuff, and that's what he did. And of course, he and Lance used to also spend hours and hours on video games, and Guitar Hero was one of their favorite games that they played while Lance and I were dating, even after we were married. Like, that's just kind of our life. Last August 17th, 2019, Isaiah got to marry the girl of his dreams, and Lance and I flew back home. We've been living in Florida for almost 3 years here in October, and we got to go to their wedding, and it was, my gosh, that wedding was super emotional. As I talked about in some other videos on my channel, I had the opportunity and the blessing to be able to do Megan's hair and her makeup for the wedding, and it was just, she just looked so flawlessly beautiful. He is anyway without that stuff, and then just to see her in her dress and her hair and the makeup and the way that my brother looked at her and the way that she looked at him, it was just amazing. So that wedding was really emotional for me. I probably just ruined all of my makeup. I just remember dabbing my face with the whole thing because they were just so happy. And to see my brother with everything that he's been through, find a woman who cherishes him the way that she does and didn't care what things she might have to face with him in the future medically. The last 2 years have, before they got married, and then obviously this, you know, last 2 years of his life, especially from dating Megan and all that, have been pretty blissful. I know that's what he was telling me today. 2018 and 2019 have been really great years for him. And so fast forward to 2020. It's been hard. Again, as I said in the beginning, I don't think that 2020 has turned out to be the year that anybody thought it was going to be. I know that when Lance and I were home in August, we just felt God tugging us that it was time to move back home. Florida has been great, but it has been a very lonely and isolating experience here, not having family, not having friends, not really even having a church to plug into. It's been hard. So we made the decision pretty quickly after we got back home in August that we were going to be moving home. God had been kind of tugging on our hearts before then, but when we went home in August, man, it just kind of solidified where we were at. And so our goal was to move home in 2020 and basically to get there by March. The way that our lease was running, all that kind of stuff in our current place. I think we all know, at least here in the US, the world stopped turning for us in March. And not only did it stop turning for everybody here in the US in March, it stopped turning for us on a lot of other elements of our life. Our timeline didn't really work out like we had planned, and we were having to not know it, but prepare for impact because we were about to face an even bigger battle than anything that we faced before as a family. My dad was sent by ambulance to the hospital in March. We actually thought he was gonna die. Friday, March 27th, he almost lost his life. My dad was having a lot of problems going on and a lot of internal bleeding that they couldn't figure out where it was coming from, and he almost died on that Friday. And I'm sure all of you can know, but my mom was not allowed to be there due to all the rules and regulations in the hospital to COVID. So my dad's in the hospital alone going through this. My parents are, struggling financially with all of this going on even prior to that and all of this now. My mom can't be there. We're trying to manage all these emotions, and had my dad have passed away, we wouldn't have even been able to have a funeral for him based upon everything that was going on at the time. So it's really hard to navigate through. But again, praise God, my dad made it. They figured out what was going on. He had some surgeries, and my dad is doing great. But life crashed again on Monday, the 30th of March. My dad remained in the hospital from that time for another 8 or so days later. So my dad's in the hospital, and then on Monday, March 30th, my brother was and his wife went to the ER because they thought he was having appendicitis, and so it turns out that's not what it was. They found a softball-sized tumor on his abdomen, and it was also affecting his colon as well. So, of course, they admitted my brother for loads of testing, and again, all alone. His wife can't be there. None of us can be there. I'm down here feeling pretty helpless. My dad's in the hospital, nearly died, still in the hospital. It's touch and go. Now my brother is in the hospital and there's a tumor. My mom, I know, is just beside herself. She honestly told me she doesn't even really remember a whole lot about those couple of days with all of that because it's such a blur. She just said she remembers being on her face before God a lot, but that's really about it. There's so much coming at us at one time. And unfortunately, my brother is alone in the hospital and is diagnosed with lymphoma, what's called PTL, is post-transplant lymphoma, which apparently we didn't know. PTL is pretty common for transplant patients, except that most of them that get it usually are post-transplant within, I want to say 1 to 3 years, could be 1 to 5. Again, there's so much data, it's hard to remember it all. But my brother's 27 years post-transplant on his heart and 11 years post-transplant on his kidney. So to have this is really weird. He's kind of an anomaly. Again, we've always said, if you're a Friends fan, you'll know what this is from. But my brother is literally a medical marvel, as Ross was a medical marvel on Friends. But my brother was diagnosed with T-cell lymphoma, and there's 2 types. There's B-cell and T-cell, and T-cell only occurs in 7% of the population that actually get it. So, here we are again, fighting the third battle for Isaiah's life. And this is the one that is the most scary because of where we are now. Isaiah spent the next several weeks in and out of the hospital. I think in a 30-day period, he was in the hospital for like 21 or 24 days from just internal bleeding and reacting to the medications that they're giving him and chemotherapy. Praise God, he hasn't had any adverse effects from the chemotherapy. His heart is in amazing condition. Usually chemotherapy affects the heart. Nope, his heart's fine. Kidney's fine, he's good. He's lost his hair. But he hasn't gotten really sick or anything like that. It's been really, truly a Jesus experience, and the things that we've been praying over him. We've just seen God work so many miracles over him over the last several months, but we haven't seen the miracle that we've been praying for, which is remission, right? It's the one that whenever you get that cancer diagnosis, that's the one that we're all clinging so desperately to. Isaiah hasn't been able to work, so obviously my parents are hurting financially, my brother and his wife are hurting financially. He's trying to apply for disability right now, but it hasn't been approved, and we don't know the outcome of that. And if he doesn't get approved, by October, it's going to get really scary for he and Megan. And praise God to all the people that have sent him grocery cards and money and things of that nature. We are so grateful for that because you guys have blessed them. So thank you if you're watching this and you've been one of those people. But Isaiah, as I mentioned, has undergone 4 rounds of chemo, and this last round was pretty intense. And they told him 6 weeks ago that they needed to see on his PET scan that was this past week, which was Tuesday, I believe, this past Tuesday. And today is the 11th of July, 10th of July. It's Saturday, 11th. But they had said that they needed to see that his tumor has shrunk tremendously. It started out as a softball and it's half that size now. Praise God. It is like, we've just been praying for that sucker to shrink. I've literally just had visions of God just like crushing the cancer in his hands and it just disintegrating into dust. Like I'm standing on those visions that God has given me. He went in for his PET scan this past Tuesday. We didn't get news that we had been praying for. Isaiah's chemotherapy, while the lymphoma is less, it's not working. And we're running out of road. And we're running out of options. And Isaiah's case is different and special because he's a transplant recipient. So things that they would do with normal people like myself, or maybe you if you're watching this, they're leery and nervous to do with him because they have to worry about organ rejection. So we're looking at possible treatments, and that's in the air right now because we don't know where they're at with that. Okay, mascara's not running too bad. He just had an endoscopy yesterday, Friday, and that endoscopy was actually, I know that I said that his cancer is on his abdomen, it's affecting his colon, but the reason they didn't want to do a colonoscopy is because they don't want to cause any more issues. When he got diagnosed, they were concerned they were going to have to remove his colon and he would have a colostomy bag and all of that stuff. There were so many different things being talked about, so they really don't want to like go in through that route and cause any issues. So they decided to do the scope down the throat, and they got everything they needed yesterday. So we're awaiting the results for that. And as he spoke with his doctor on Wednesday, his oncologist, they talked about different options and possible treatments. And there's, clinical trial treatments. There's other treatments, and then there's one treatment that is a big possibility for us as well that we're honestly we're kind of hoping for, but I know that they're nervous about doing it. And that's a bone marrow. And the best possible person for bone marrow would be me. And I'm more than thrilled and honored to be able to be that person to donate bone marrow to my brother. And from what I understand about bone marrow, if you don't know, the reason they're scared to do that is because they don't want to wake up Isaiah's immune system. They're concerned that anything that they do that affects his immune system could cause that heart to start rejecting. So bone marrow would basically be transferring my immune system into Isaiah's body. And I have had zero health issues my entire life. I have been healthy my whole life. My brother and my dad have had all these problems, and my mom's healthy, but I think her age is a factor. But I am perfectly healthy. So we are praying over next steps. We're not sure what they're gonna say, what kind of options they're gonna come back with next week once we get the results. But I can tell you right now, with confidence, I'm not concerned about my brother's heart rejecting. And they said the crazy part is, I think, is that they said that if it was just a kidney, they would risk it, because kidneys you can come by. And obviously he's got one on reserve, right? But a heart, that's another story, and they don't want to do anything to cause that heart to reject. But the thing is, Isaiah's heart has been his heart for 27 years of his life. It's his for all intents and purposes. The first 6 weeks of his life it wasn't, but other than that, it's been his. And his heart is in such amazing condition that a couple years ago they entertained the idea of even pulling him off of what little rejection medication. He's on so minimal medication these days. They even teetered about pulling him off that, because the skin cancers they were worried about those killing him more than anything else, which is why they pulled him off so many medications. And as I mentioned earlier, everything about his body other than this lymphoma is perfect. My brother's body is perfect other than this. So that's where we're at. And Lance and I need to get home. Our lease here at this house in Florida is up on August 31st. And if we don't have a home to go back to in Missouri, then we're stuck here for another 90 to 120 days possibly. Time is of the essence. And if I do end up being a bone marrow donor for my brother, if that's the route that they go, and again, we're prone to taking risk in our life, so my brother and I have already told the doctor on his team like, hey, we're open. Like, y'all want to discuss it? Let's get on the phone. Let's discuss this, because we are not worried. Like, we trust Jesus. We're not worried. We're not worried about that heart. We're not worried about that kidney. If this is the thing that y'all see will save his life, let's go. That's where we're at. But bills are stacking up for everybody, and Lance and I run a business, and you know, we've taken a hit too with everything that's gone on in our world since March. And so moving out of state's expensive, where there's a house possibly for us, and it's going to need some work. It's just a lot. And as I mentioned, my parents are struggling. Isaiah is struggling. They're in medical debt, and it is a lot. So we've never asked for help, but I'm doing it now, because we can't make it happen without it. And a lot's hinging on the finances of all of this. And a lot's hinging on what could be needed for the finances of this. So, after much prayer and thought and talking with Lance and my family, I wanted to put together a GoFundMe for my brother. We're starting out with a goal of $100,000, and to be honest, I don't think that's going to be enough, but it's a starting point. And so what I'm asking now from anybody that's watched this video is, if you feel compelled to give, that you would. I know Lance and I have given to several GoFundMes over the last few months for people that have been hurting through everything that they've been going through, and our little bit that we gave went a long way. And so if you're thinking like, oh my gosh, I don't have much, I only have $1 or $5, every little bit matters. And when 100 people give a small gift and sow a seed like that, it changes lives, y'all. It just does. And so I'm asking that if you feel compelled to give, great, that you would. And if you can't, that's okay. If you want to share this video, that would even be helpful. We just need help, and that's where we're at. And so I know my time on YouTube has been a bit sporadic, and I foresee it getting a little bit more sporadic. I just wanted to let you guys know what was going on, and then of course anybody who sees this video, because this video is going to be tied to the GoFundMe as well, know what was going on. And I wanted to give you some story about what we've walked through. And my brother is a freaking fighter. Literally, his name means God is my helper in Hebrew, and that's all God has ever done, is create the pathway for my brother to walk. And as we continue to pray over the coming days about what we're going to be told by doctors, what options there are, what things we can do naturally to help where he's at, I would also ask that you be praying for us, that God would give us clarity and discernment, and that he would give us wisdom, and that no matter what the doctors say, that we have a peace in our heart about where God is directing us to go as a family. And now what I want to do is just let you hear a little bit, quick message from Isaiah. Thank you in advance to anybody who decides to donate to this cause. We appreciate you, we love you, and thank you so much for your support and for listening.
I just want to thank anyone who feels compelled to donate to my family and helping me fight this. This truly is the third battle for my life, and I'm starting to think that the third time is the charm. I've got a lot of life left to live, a lot of things I want to do, a lot of things I have to do, and I am not giving up, but I need help. My wife and I need help, and if you feel compelled to donate, thank you. But if you don't, I just want your prayers and your support and your encouragement. Positivity is the best thing for me right now. I just need to hear that this is the hardest thing I've ever been through. And that's saying something, because I've done a lot. But God's also blessing me through this as well. This is not an accident. This is not without purpose or without meaning. God has his ways, and I don't understand him. I don't pretend to understand him for a moment, but I'm going to be obedient to him, and proclaim his name all through this journey. And I look forward to meeting more people, more doctors and more nurses, and getting to know them as my friends and family, because that's really what it is. Thank you so much, and God bless.